Anyway, what these things do is build up both the duration and the intensity of our exposures to these materials. Another thing that you may be interested in, several years ago, all the cell phone companies were adding, coming by our phone. We have less drop calls, we have no drop calls, and all the rest of it. What they did is the cell phone industry redesigned the telephones in such a way that even when your phone is off, it works as a relay transmitter. So if you're walking around and you're carrying this phone on your person, it could be transmitting messages for even hours per day. The only way to turn a cell phone off is to remove the battery. Anyway, so what's happening, once you go back to Magda's page, you will start to see what happens with exposure to these frequencies. And again, these are things that are all being, pasted over. I mean, they're not important. They don't really mean anything. So this is what they're doing. In Toronto, which is quite a large city, if you drive through the city, you will note that on the buildings of things like TELUS and Bell and Mobile, all the telecommunications companies, there are no antennas on their roofs. Yet across the street, on the top of a high-rise building which is low rent, you might see anywhere up to 40 antennas on a single building. Now, these things are actually cooking the people that are just underneath them. If you care to dig into some history, Canada, the United States, and Britain all paid disability pensions. They paid long-term damage settlements and early retirements and all of these things to people that had worked on radar during the Second World War. So these pensions were realized, noticed, and paid out in the late 40s and into the early 50s because of the damage affected on people working on radar, which at that time was in the 6 megahertz ranges, which is very close to where our cell phones and deck phones are right now. The point is, there is no serious overall research has been done on this at all. When you involve the individuals who are supposed to have the answers, they invariably take the scope of this and try and take it down into like one little sentence, like in Ontario. Oh, safety code 6. And then you sit there and you're supposed to research all this. When you do, you find out how it came to be. And you realize that the people that are telling you this haven't a clue how it came to be because they haven't done the research. We are responsible for our own health. As soon as you give that responsibility to someone else, you're going to lose it. And we're doing this video to get people looking at these things, noticing these things, filming the plants along the side of their house, looking at these materials. This is going on long enough. But when I was a kid living in Ontario, and we would go for a drive in the country, invariably every time we stopped for gas or we stopped for our picnic or what have you, the big job was pulling out the bug scrubbers and cleaning the windshield of the car. This was endless. This was Ontario, lots of woods, lots of forest. Last year, Ricky and I drove, in the winter, we drove all the way to Florida, to Key Largo, and back again, and we never cleaned the windshield a single time from insects. In fact, there was only 2 or 3 on it. The point is, somehow these electromagnetic fields, whether it's the cell towers, the cell phones, the combinations, or whatever, are affecting insects. They are disappearing. We've noticed complete changes in patterns of black flies and mosquitoes in Ontario. I now live in a country area which, was always infested. In 1975, I drove my motorcycle from Toronto to Ottawa, and I went through the dusk hours. And when I got to Ottawa, I had such a slathering of insects on me that I literally was able to dig into it and pull it off like a sheet. There was thousands. Today, very, very little. So these things are having effects on other people. There's another report out of England where they're talking about swans that cannot fly south anymore because there was a cell phone tower erected, and now what they're doing, they're leaving the pond and they're taking off and they're heading to their south direction, and then they end up flying in a full circle and coming right back around and landing back in the same pond. So whether this is going to interfere to the point that birds cannot fly south, we don't know. We do know that there's thousands of them dropping out of the skies in the United States and possibly other places in the world. And again, the powers that be say, oh, that can't have anything to do with this. However, they don't know. They know nothing. In post-Second World War, Russia developed significant relationships with China. And one of the projects that went on at the time was the Russian investigation into the acupuncture needle, sorry. Anyway, what the Russians wanted to do, or what they did do, was they wired up acupuncture needles in order to determine the degree of electrical implementation that was affected by the needles, which obviously produced some healthy results. So this is what they did, and their research continued, and what they found was that there was extremely microelectric voltages that contributed to the overall human health condition. And this information, once this was garnered, I guess it went through their system over the years, and they had the wherewithal to look at microelectric currents affecting human beings, both in healing and I guess the radio effects as well. So some of this culminated with a silly story that in the late 1960s, the Russians beamed a microwave beam at the American consulate. And I believe this is very, very well documented. But they beamed this beam at the American consulate, and they beamed it at a rate that was 1/5 of the American safety limit. Now, the Americans obviously couldn't say much because it was below their safety limits. However, what did happen is an inordinate number of cancers, blood-related problems, tumors, and all sorts of things affected the workers in the U.S. consulate. And over the years, it got to the point where if, I guess through the consular service, if you took a job and went to Moscow, they were paying something like a 30 or 40% wage premium to go there because of the sickness rates. Now, the Russian research had come from the microelectric effects on the human body, where the American military research came from the macroelectric effects on the human body. So there's a great difference. I believe today the safety limit on Russian electrical workers is 1/10,000th of what it is on American workers, and Canadian as well, because everything you get, we get. But anyway, this bears some looking into, it bears some documentation, and it bears people digging into this. Now, all of this brings us back to these ormic materials, okay? We know there's these presence of the electromagnetic frequencies. However, they do not do any research into these ormic materials. These ormic materials absolutely work. You can put a teaspoonful of an Ormus precipitate into a gallon of good water and use it on your indoor plants or your aquarium and watch the changes. I mean, there's no rocket science here. Just watch the plants. Even right now, this is January. At the short days of the year right now, 3.5 weeks, you will see significant plant changes in your plants. And you really only need to do this once per year. My wife Ricky bought some green onions, or scallions, you know, the long, thin, leafy onions. And she brought them home. She cut them all off with a scissor, so we had little stumps about so big. And she decided, well, I'm going to put it into a little glass with some Ormus, which she did. And within 8 days, she cut off all these green stalks again. They'd grown that much. And 9 days later, she cut it off a second time. And I think it was about 8 or 9 days later, she cut it off a third time. By then, the plants were getting quite spindly. And this was all with 2 drops of Ormus. She got 4 harvests off these plants in about a month, just in a glass with a couple of drops of Ormus. She went back to the supermarket and figured, well, they're getting spindly, I'll buy some new ones. So she bought another set and brought them home, a couple of drops of Ormus, and this time she didn't need them right away, so she didn't cut the leaves off. Put them into the Ormus, and these things completely were dead. They rotted. They did not grow. Later on, we found out that these green onions, scallions, had been irradiated. So the effect of the radiation simply seems to have knocked all life force out of the plant altogether. So using Ormus can be a reasonable, sensible, inexpensive way to test some of the food you're buying to see if the stuff still is alive. Another example, she was given a little, one of these little wee 1-inch roses, it was cut maybe 6 or 7 inches long, and she put that in a little vase at home, and 1 drop of Ormus, and within I'd say about a week or 8 days, that little rose grew 25 brand new leaves without any root fibers whatsoever. So there's material in this that is essential to life. Once something is irradiated, which again is done with various frequencies, I mean, this is what radiation is, it's the breaking down of molecules. Anyway, this is what happened. So be aware that there is food out there that is irradiated, and when they do this, there is some essential life force lost from this food. Again, there's no measurements, there's no studies, there's nothing looking into this, but you can do this at home and check your own plants. Other things that we've come across is water. Ormus can be separated out of water if you take it up to a boil in your microwave, and then you use the resulting water after it's cooled down and pick some selected plants, and the plants with the microwaved water will do much worse than the plants with whatever water you're already using. It seems that the magnetron in the microwave, once it fires up, emits a very strong electromagnetic field. We can measure these fields with our Gauss meter at 8 feet whenever the microwave is on, and at 2 feet when the microwave is off. All it has to be is plugged in, and it maintains a charge in there that keeps the magnetron activated so that it will work instantly for you. However, that field is always in place. The only way to shut a microwave off is to actually unplug it. Plus, when it's plugged in, it's using about 120 watts, which is like 2 of the old 60-watt light bulbs. So it's costing you to have it there. Anyway, what else did we want to cover on this? We do have some plants and things that we have some pictures, and I guess with a video I can show you these things. So what I'll do is I'm going to shut this off. I'll come back in a few seconds here, and I will bring some pictures, and you can see some of the effects of Ormus on plants, because that will interest a lot of people. Anyway, thanks. I'll be back in a minute.